Hello, my name is Jaime Snyder and I'm faculty at the University of Washington's Information School. Over the next 10 minutes, I will provide a brief overview of my paper entitled Visualizing Personal Rhythms, a Critical Visual Analysis of Mental Health in Flux. A warning, this presentation will include some moderately graphic descriptions of experiences with serious mental illness. Also, if not noted here, all image credits and citations can be found in the paper. This paper focuses on the ways in which personal data is visually represented for the purpose of managing serious mental illness. For the past few years, my team and I have been working on a personal informatics system to support therapeutic tracking practices for people managing bipolar disorder, a serious mental illness characterized by abrupt and hard to predict mood changes. This work focuses on the importance of supporting collective engagement with personal data across different stakeholders, including clinicians, family members, other caregivers, and peer supporters. One of the most important aspects of that work has been to surface the importance of empathy and communication among these stakeholders. Within our group, I lead our efforts to understand how visualizations of personal data can better reflect lived experiences with bipolar disorder and more fully support social engagement across stakeholders. One of the ways I've done this is by adopting participatory and design methods. Our 2019 CHI paper provides details about the visual elicitation methodology I have developed for this work. My presentation today focuses on a critical visual analysis of the image-making practices and visual artifacts generated during co-design sessions. Bipolar disorder is a chronic mental health condition characterized by shifts in mood from highly elevated manic states to depressive states. Therapeutic self-tracking is often recommended along with medication as a means to manage bipolar. In addition to tracking mood states, people tend to track things like sleep, activity levels, social interactions, and spending, using everything from consumer activity trackers to clinician-provided worksheets to DIY spreadsheets. So what do I mean by lived experiences? On this slide, I've included a few quotes from participants in an earlier study. We asked people with bipolar disorder how they describe their experiences to other people. Many provided really rich statements like the three I've included here. So one person described it as being underwater, but mostly I stayed just under the surface of the water, although it is very sunny. Another person described it as being both the storm and the ship caught in it. And a third described the high energy mixed episodes. Mixed episodes are when you're experiencing both depressive and manic states at the same time, as being like a roiling cloud of anger and energy barely held together by my own skin. In thinking about ways to visually encode these experiences, we're really struck by the ways that conventional approaches to representing time series data that are typically used in tracking apps don't seem to reflect the complexities we heard in these narratives. As Kennedy and colleagues note, histories of visualization conventions matter, rooted in Enlightenment ideas about objectivity and rational knowledge. They play a role in making visualizations appear neutral. Evidence of biological rhythms has typically been shared through line graphs depicting change over time. These graphs are created by adapting a Cartesian coordinate system to use the horizontal x-axis as a timeline and the vertical y-axis to indicate change within a given variable, with points plotted on a grid to indicate measurements at regular intervals. A solid connector is often drawn between adjacent plot points, creating an impression of seamless transition and ordered continuity. This graphic system represents a normative geometry and a normative temporality that visually privileges a structured, regular periodicity to biological rhythms. The connecting line refers to a causal and logical relationship between the readings taken at two adjacent points in time. In this way, a visualization of change over time supports the argument that even when variations in the periodicity, frequency, or signal strength of rhythms are noisy, the regular beat of an organism's internal clock is still visible. In the process of representing change over time, outliers are minimized and differences are smoothed, reinforcing notions of temporal predictability and the possibility of knowing what will happen next. Data visualizations in many self-tracking tools draw on these normative, meaning regular, healthy, desirable, attainable, true standards as a basis for displaying health and wellness data in familiar mountains and troughs. The critical visual analysis that I conducted compared these standard visualizations with drawings representing personal experiences with biological rhythms created by individuals with bipolar disorder. The full visual elicitation methodology deployed to collect these data is described in detail in our 2019 CHI paper. Groups of participants like those with serious mental illness are at times designated as vulnerable. Participants described precarious socioeconomic situations, complex psychosocial states, and experiences with social stigmas that in many ways resonate with this characterization. However, the co-design approach adapted for this study created space for participants to also share their expertise in the lived experience of mental health. To protect the identity of participants, all names are pseudonyms, and drawing annotations have been de-identified in any reported findings. So now I'll review the 2 drawing activities that produce the data for the visual analysis. All drawings activities used an iPad Pro and Apple Stylus. Audio and screen recordings were captured. For the first activity, participants drew a single line to represent their experiences with bipolar. They were then asked to add a second line to represent someone close to them during that time. Last, participants added a third line that represented what they would have considered an ideal state during that period. For the second activity, participants created a more detailed timeline or a diagram showing a sequence of events in their life and how they relate to each other. Participants were encouraged to freely interpret this instruction and were reminded that there were no wrong responses. For analysis of the 14 design session transcripts and approximately 35 hand-drawn annotated images, I followed Rose's framework for critical visual analysis, focusing on the 4 sites at which the meanings of an image are made: the sites of production, image, circulation, and audience. The first phase of analysis surfaced insights regarding sites of production, meaning the means by which participants identified their current state; the site of circulation, how these self-assessments were externalized; and audiences, with whom these representations were shared and why, sometimes actually for the participant themselves. Full details of findings related to these sites can be found in the paper. Here I highlight the compositional analysis of the 4th site, the images themselves. Participants noted as they worked that the relatively straightforward geometry of the line chart made it difficult to be satisfied with their drawing. As they clarified specific aspects of what the lines signified, they adapted their lines to more explicitly reflect their experiences. For example, Andrew arrived at the solution of adding a series of circular bubbles hanging off his line from below, like ripe fruit hanging from a branch, to convey passages of time that just seemed to take up more space than others. Stephanie looped a line around a horizontal axis to show that daily life without episodes was not without bumps and turns, but was different from the more acute and irregular peaks and troughs of bipolar disorder. Sarah used a patchwork of red and green to indicate a series of mixed state episodes during a particularly complicated period. Similarly, for Eleanor, red indicated a lack of self-awareness, while green represented not only intellectual understanding, but a synthesis and transformative understanding of what having bipolar means for her. Major events, represented by circles, were characterized by a mix of confusion and insight, gradually over time giving way to greater understanding and relative stability, decreased red and increased green. Jack and others used the highlighter feature of the digital drawing application to mark zones of acceptable behavior. Most participants who discussed staying within bounds explicitly clarified that they did not always feel in bounds, but worked hard to look like they were in control so as not to worry loved ones and to avoid being treated differently. Typically, a rising line indicates increased values while a falling line represents decreased values. For many participants, interpretations of slope, rate of change, apex, the highest point experienced, and nadir, the lowest point experienced, did not precisely map to these conventions. Although manic episodes were initially drawn as peaks, some individuals struggled to explain the exact state at the top of a curve because that period was simply irreconcilable with normal life. In these cases, the continuity of the line contrasted sharply with a lived experience. Jack pointed out that the highest peak of his line was not necessarily meant to represent a relative most manic moment, but was just a kind of placeholder for a time that defied description. Instead, he suggested that perhaps it would be more accurate to make an annotation, "Thar be dragons," referring to the tradition of marking unknown and possibly dangerous territory on maps. Doug also commented on the difficulty of pinpointing a starting point from which to orient a slope, because in hindsight, the appearance of symptoms often predated explicit crisis or maladaptive behavior. Thomas also noted that that transitions marked in many of the drawings by slope often map to periods of great uncertainty and shifting points of reference. He depicted this as micro fluctuations along an otherwise smooth slope. Both Doug and Emily also depicted a feeling of discontinuity caused by rapidly shifting states of orientation. They both drew disconnected plateaus, and however, they each expressed dissatisfaction about their ability to represent what they were trying to communicate. Last, while some participants adapted and modified conventional line charts, others abandoned linear approaches for representing time altogether. In creating and explaining her drawing, Emily identified with the ideas of spread and growth, and with certain edges or parts of an organism hardening over time, but still having the possibility of expansion in any direction. May similarly explained her mandala-like timeline. "I think of my life as a kind of circle as opposed to timeline, because I feel like a lot of things come back in my moods, they cycle, and everything kind of just feels like it's going round and round." The ways that participants adapted visualization conventions in order to express and depict their experiences surfaced opportunities for thinking more inclusively about visual encodings for personal data visualizations. Participatory design methods like those used in this study are a start. However, it is also important to challenge formal data and design literacies. Viega and Wattenberg used the term vernacular visualization to draw attention to differences between the activities of expert visualization researchers who design systems to support specialized analytic tasks, and non-experts who create visualizations using tools at hand to accomplish highly situated and personal tasks. In this sense, the person doing vernacular visualization is not striving to be a data scientist or graphic designer and falling short or failing. This individual is responding to needs within their own environment and using visualization in order to address these needs. In this sense, the drawings discussed here are also examples of everyday adaptive design, an important area of HCI research that acknowledges and values the ways in which non-expert users alter, tailor, appropriate, and manipulate materials and practices in order to meet localized needs. According to Moran, the design of technology does not stop when it is launched to the public, but continues as people use, reconceptualize, reinterpret, and adapt digital tools to what they need most. Everyday adaptation highlights the ways that design practices exist beyond the boundaries of a lab or a studio. In this study, we show that even those untrained in quantitative analysis are able to engage with subtle aspects of data representation. These drawings also contribute to emerging insights about what it means to be data literate in the world today. When the principles of first, recognizing vernacular expertise, and second, learning from the labor of adaptation performed by many members of marginalized communities on a daily basis, are applied to the design of visualizations representing identity and personhood, they can result in more inclusive, appropriate, and ethical personal visualizations. Thanks for your time, and please reach out, contact me if you have any questions.